You know what time it is! You know what time it is! E-S-E-L-E-S-E-L! And you know what underdogs is? It's a hungry dog!
And the second tick away, and the Eagles are alive!
We're alive to see again!
Eagles fans everywhere, this is for you! Let the celebration begin!
Oh, man. Welcome, everyone. This is episode 80 of the Wingin podcast. I'm Ali. I'm joined by Alex. Andrew is not here today. He couldn't make it today's episode. I think back to the old folk tale of Chicken Little and how the acorn fell out from the sky and Chicken Little started screaming, "The sky is falling, the sky is falling." And it certainly seemed like the rhetoric that the sky was falling throughout this year, where we felt that a storm was coming, may have been a little bit, sort of hyperbolic. But at this point in the season, we are not speaking in hyperbole anymore. The Philadelphia Eagles lost to arguably one of the worst teams in the NFL yesterday, and we have next week to contend with, where we potentially could get the number 2 seed and win the division, followed by the playoffs. If you haven't already done so, please follow us on our social media channels at wingin.it.pod. On Instagram as well as TikTok. If you're watching us on YouTube, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss another episode. Alex, my man, you were at the game yesterday. Talk to me about, obviously we're going to get into, some of the things that happened in that game, but we're leading 21-6 at halftime. What's the vibe like in the second half?
Yeah, I mean, dude, I got to say that Sidney Brown interception that place was rocking. It was exciting. There was no fear from us at all going into half that we weren't going to be able to come out of this. Hey, real quick, does my mic sound okay coming through you?
It sounds beautiful.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, we didn't really have any fear. 21-6 up at half. Looks at the Cardinals. All they can do is run the ball effectively. So they're just going to take away the time of possession. Obviously, that's the way that story went. And I will say, Ali, though, I feel tricked. I feel like I have been critical at this team near the end of the season, but I think you know this, that I always had a little bit of hope, a little bit of optimism, a little bit of a belief that, we're not executing as well. We're going to hit a corner. Things are happening in the NFL that we need to fall our way. We had an opportunity to get the 1 seed, maybe get the 2. Actually, the 2 seed sounded really likely. Going to be able to host a playoff game here in Philadelphia. I never really believed that we would get back to a Super Bowl this year, but did feel like we were turning a corner. Did feel that it was going to be a statement win. Mind you, audience, I was a 12.5 point favorite on the Eagles there. And we could go on a little bit of a run. It's what I believed. We were going to finish the season, a couple wins in the playoffs with our heads held high, say, hey, we're going to regroup, fix up some of the sloppy things, figure out our coordinator situation in the offseason, and be good to go. I no longer believe that. This team has crushed my spirit. Absolutely crushed my spirit. I'm not angry today. I'm not mad. I'm not pointing fingers. We're going to talk about it. We're going to break it down on today's episode, but this team has absolutely crushed my spirit. The time, the commitment, the money, the traveling, the plane tickets, the Airbnbs, the extraordinary depths we go to root for this team, and they just don't reciprocate it. My spirit is absolutely crushed today.
Well, I'm sad to hear that. I think the cool thing about this team, trying to stay optimistic as much as I can here, right? Because do I think that we're going to make a deep playoff run? No. Will I be surprised if we win our first playoff game? Yes, I absolutely will be, because at this point, who are we looking at? Playing Detroit or Dallas? No, it would be.
I've heard it would be the NFC South champions, so we'd probably be going to Tampa and taking on Baker Mayfield and the Bucs, which I actually do feel okay about.
I actually don't feel confident about that, right? Because the team, you can make an argument that the team that played Tampa Bay earlier this year is not the team that we have today, right?
Doesn't even feel like the same season. I agree.
You're right. Is this team going to win the Super Bowl? No. And is it going to be because we have a bad offense? No, it's going to be because we have a bad offense and a bad defense. Um, to me, this is one of those situations where, coaching can bring about the best in a non-ideal situation when it comes to player talent. And in this case, I think this is an example of how coaching can also hinder a lot of talent on a team and not bring it up to sort of play at its potential. So I don't know, man. Like we don't have a script for this episode. We can get into 2 up, 2 down. We can get into some of the frustrations. What do you want to do?
Yeah, I mean, let's just see where it goes and see where it takes us, right? If
Yeah.
we want to do 2 up, 2 down, Sidney Brown's interception was sick. And the second up is I think Jalen Hurts didn't play a bad game. I think a lot of the pressure is going to be off of him. But here's kind of like getting into the downs of everything. We don't need much analysis on the things that we saw that were positive. I've really lost a lot of faith in Nick Sirianni. You know, I think Sirianni's built for the city. I think when things are good, they're really good. But what I learned yesterday is that Nick is very reactive in the way that he calls a game. And he's very, very immature. You know, Ali, you and I are in business. We don't podcast full time as much as we wish we could. In your business world, do you have someone that you look up to, a mentor per se?
Yes.
Yeah, right? I have a mentor too. I have someone that's been helping me along the lines, making sure that I'm staying in my lane. When I have an issue, I'm going to them. The thing that I learned about watching this team yesterday, and I'll get into the specific example of why, is the Philadelphia Eagles need an adult in the room. Nick Sirianni is just not built for this from an experience perspective. I did a little bit of research on his Wikipedia page today. And, you know, coming from, and oddly enough, he went to my alma mater, IUP, as a wide receivers coach. He was an offensive quality coach in Kansas City. He joined the San Diego Chargers and worked with the team's quarterback coach and offensive coordinator. And then in Indianapolis, he was also an offensive coordinator. Now, he never has called plays and what that looks like, but Nick needs to know how to run an offense here. And when I say things are reactive, how many quarterback draws did we see in the first half and how many did we see in the second half when he's like, hey, we need to get something that's working here? So he starts running Jalen Hurts and putting his prized possession in danger. Here's the part that I just don't understand about Nick. The game manager aspect of his game, the only thing he needs to do because he doesn't call plays is woefully bad. It is woefully bad. When Jonathan Gannon kicked that onside kick, that was a huge slap in the face. That was a statement saying, hey, in a tie game, if we get the ball back, good for us, but we're going to ensure that you give us the ball back really quickly, regardless if you score or not, because we're going to make this a game regardless. So the first 2 plays of that drive actually was fine. A run to DeAndre Swift up the middle, then an 18-yard pass to A.J. Brown. Then the holding call happened. Oh, mind you, we did call a timeout after the DeAndre Swift. So 3 timeouts down to 2. Philadelphia committed a 10-yard holding penalty. 1st and 20. Jalen Hurts runs a quarterback draw. 2nd and 16. Jalen Hurts runs a quarterback draw. 3rd and 19. We call another timeout. 3rd and 19. Bubble screen to Kenneth Gainwell. 4th and 15. Jake Elliott kicks a field goal. We know what happens underneath there. Nick was
Mind
asked,
you,
hold on. I just want to get to this.
Devontae Smith, remember that piece.
Okay. Nick Sirianni was asked in his post-game conference. Well, what was the mindset there? It's very apparent Nick was settling for a field goal. He was playing scared. He told the media that the wind was blowing in his face. Now, I was in the stadium. The wind wasn't necessarily blowing in our face. And a few plays before that, Jalen Hurts got an 18-yard gain to A.J. Brown. Ali, what makes more sense here? Getting it in 5, 6, 8-yard chunks or sending out Jake Elliott to kick in the wind in your face? Okay, really bad call. The next drive, Greg Dortch. I don't know who Greg Dortch is. Gets a 36-yard catch down to the 5-yard line with 1:20 left, and we didn't call a timeout to preserve the clock. Then on the next play, the Philadelphia Eagles actually had the audacity to try to tackle James Conner, which they did. And then we called a timeout instead of letting him score a touchdown and giving the ball back to Jalen Hurts with one timeout and over a minute left. But what ended up happening is Hurts got the ball back with 32 seconds left and no timeouts. Nick's only responsibility in here is to be a game manager. He's settling for field goals, and he's doing a piss poor job of managing the clock into what we need to do here. I don't fault Brian Johnson for putting 31 points. 31 seems to be like this theme this year, right? 31 points up for our offense this year. I think 31 points in the NFL is fine. I don't know what the average amount of points scored for a game is, but I assure you it's not as high as 31. When we need to put teams away, when we have the game on the line and we need to put it away, the only thing Nick Sirianni has to do and what he's done his entire career is be a game manager. And we are seeing time and time again, he is not doing that effectively. I'll get off my high horse for now. I just had to get all of this out.
I think you pinpointed a couple of things, right? The third down call to Kenneth Gainwell, who's your number 2 back. I guess Kenny Gainwell's our number 2, even though we got Boston Scott and Rashad Penny. Rashad Penny, by the way, was active for the game against the Cardinals because Bradley Roby was benched. Bradley Roby, out of our maligned secondary, has the lowest passer rating out of any one of our defensive backs with 67.4. That guy was benched for Rashad Penny, a guy who has seen, maybe 3 snaps or three plays in total, counting special teams all season long. This is a mismanagement of coaching. To answer your question about 31 points, the Miami Dolphins, who have the highest, the best offense, the best points per game in the NFL this season, they're averaging 30.1 points per game.
Yeah.
So scoring 31 points on any team, I feel pretty good about our chances at winning that football game. Dortch, that was a name that I didn't hear or didn't really register in my mind until the end of the game yesterday. I didn't even realize Hollywood Brown was on injured reserve until I had to look that up. I was like, how is this Cardinals team going up and down the field at will against this secondary? But, at the end of the day, the defense allowed 3 consecutive 70-plus yard touchdown drives and hadn't held the Cardinals outside the 25-yard line in any of their drives all game long. The first and 20 quarterback run, Kenny Gainwell bubble screen, I think is just a culmination of what we've been feeling all year long. So
it's perfect. It's a perfect display of what we've been doing when we need it the most. A perfect display.
Yes. And I think so. Kyle Brandt, the announcer on NFL Network, does Good Morning Football.
Yep.
He was talking about this is like very early on in the season, like week 3, week 4, talking about how he got this guy from Comcast to come to his house because his cable wasn't working, and he starts talking to him and finds out the guy's from Philly. And Kyle Brandt asks him, he's like, are you excited about this season? And the guy goes, no, a storm is coming. And he was just so flabbergasted by the fact that we were undefeated at that point in time. And he was like, I don't understand Philly fans. Like, your team is undefeated. They're looking like they're one of the best teams in the NFL right now. Why are you so freaked out? This is the moment where we were the Chicken Little that I referenced at the beginning of this episode. The sky was in fact falling. It wasn't just an acorn that fell on our head. We knew that when you're winning, they're labeled as flaws. When you're losing, they're labeled as problems. And unfortunately, over the last 5 weeks, we're 1-4. All of our flaws, they didn't just come out of nowhere. We've been dealing with them throughout this entire year. But now that we're losing games because of them, they're becoming bigger and bigger problems. And the playoffs, it is not going to get any easier in the playoffs, right? Like, I think the playoffs are the moment when you have to sort of like make peace with all of your demons throughout the season. The Cowboys can't beat a winning team on the road. It looks like they're probably going to get a home game in the first round of the playoffs.
Yeah.
The Miami Dolphins can't beat a winning team in general, right? Except for the Dallas Cowboys, who were playing on the road. All of these other teams have to make peace with all their demons. When I have to think about what our demons are, we've got a piss poor secondary. Sorry, didn't mean to curse. We've got a run defense that was at one point in the season the best run defense in the entire league, and we allow over 220 rushing yards yesterday to Connor. We've got offensive play calling that generally puts points on the board, but we talked about this earlier in the season. Situational play calling is more of an art than a science. It's why some coaches are successful in the moments that matter the most during the games, and it's why some coaches run quarterback draw, and then a wide, running back bubble screen.
Yeah, and I want to call something out real quick. There's a big difference between play calling and situational play calling, because I don't think the play calling was really that bad. The entire game, I felt that it was. I mean, dude, we saw Jalen Hurts lining up under center. Like when he did that, there was an actual audible like cackling in the stand saying, "Oh my God, Hurts is under center." There was a play out of the pistol. I loved the Kenneth Gainwell fake tush push throw for a first down to, I think that was Devonta Smith. I love that. Like that was great. Like that is what we wanted to see. But the situational side of that, when you're running a quarterback draw on 1st and 20 in a tie game, that is so I guess like my question to you, Ali, is like, who do you think is responsible for that? Do you think that is Nick saying, "Hey, we're settling here," or "We're doing this," or do you really think it's Brian Johnson? Because Nick was saying in those calls, we're trying to expose the gap defense because we think that we're expecting them to send the house. They ain't sending the house on 1st and 20, homie. I'm sorry, Nick, but I play enough Madden to know they're not sending the house on 1st and 20 because they don't need to send the house on 1st and 20. If it was 3rd and 20, maybe. So, like, help me understand, Ali. Do you think this is boiling down to Nick? Or do you really think that this is just Brian Johnson being really bad in situations? Because outside of that, I wasn't too upset with the offense and how they played. I don't think any of this is on Jalen Hurts. I think he did what he needed to do.
I mean, my personal belief is me, right. I was brought up in the military. Anything that my team gets right is on them. Anything that they get wrong is on me.
Sure.
And it's going to be either because I failed to lead them, coach them, guide them, or resource them. I think to the Harry Truman quote of "the buck stops here," right? He knew that he was ultimately responsible for the success and failure of this nation with his decisions. I think this is on Nick Sirianni, 100%, no questions asked. Because when it was about a defensive issue, he had no problems demoting Sean Desai and promoting Matt Patricia. Matt Patricia, by the way, who gave up 41 points against Nick Foles and the Philadelphia Eagles in the Super Bowl. Not necessarily the best resume for defensive play calling. He did have a head coaching position, I believe, right after that season that was very, very short-lived. Matt Patricia is not an upgrade by any means to Sean Desai. This is a scheme issue. It's also a personnel issue because I do believe we are lacking in the linebacker position. I do believe we are lacking in the defensive line position because our defensive line, if you think about last year, how many rotations did we have? These guys were coming in fresh after fresh after fresh play. It was just insane, the level of sort of repetition that we provided these guys, just because each one of them was just like, okay, yeah, I'm coming in for 3-4 plays and then I'm coming out to take a rest. We've got issues on our secondary. Obviously, there's some health issues there, but James Bradbury has regressed significantly. Eli Ricks is not a great corner. Sidney Brown,
he is slow.
Right,
he's slow. Yeah,
right. I mentioned Bradley Roby, Avonte Maddox. Like, listen, I love Avonte Maddox, but the dude just can't stay healthy, right? And
he has another X-ray again.
Yes.
After that game, yeah.
Nickel cornerback is probably one of the most difficult positions to play. I've already said defensive back is probably the most difficult position to play, in my opinion, next to the quarterback position. But the nickel corner position, you're like a hybrid between a safety and a cornerback. And you've got to guard their players' most physical, most dominant receivers when they line up in the slot. And here we are taking our best nickel corner in Bradley Roby and benching him so that we can upgrade Rashad Penny for whatever reason. This is poor game management. This is poor coaching. And when it comes to situational play calling, the fact that we have been talking about quarterback runs inside the red zone. We've been talking about giving the ball to Kenny Gainwell inside the red zone as far back as week 2, week 3. And here, all the way up to this past Sunday, yesterday, when we're talking about poor play calling in the moments that matter most, when we absolutely need a score, when it's clear that our defense cannot keep their offense out of the end zone, we're settling for field goals. This is 100% on Nick Sirianni. I'm saddened by the fact that, Brian Johnson, for all we know, could be a stellar offensive coordinator, but we're never going to know because Nick Sirianni, this is like his offense, and he's looking over Brian Johnson's shoulder every step of the way.
Well, and that's why I get back to, and I did have a point when I said that Nick Sirianni needs an adult in the room. Demote Nick back to offensive coordinator. I don't know what it looks like, but I look at the market now and I see a coach like Bill Belichick that's becoming available. Do you really think that Bill Belichick would let any of that happen on his watch? His team sucks. And they sold their soul for all those Super Bowls that they had before. They had a lot of money that they had to go. They don't have a wide receiver one or anything. Do you think someone like Bill Belichick is going to let that happen? I mean, Ali, are we really talking about firing Nick here in the offseason? Would you bring in someone like Bill or another coach that's available? Or do you really think that we're led to believe this lie that we've been told since week 7 that we just have to execute better? We're not playing to the standard. Well, when are we going to play to the standard, Nick?
Yeah, I would, if I was Howie Roseman, it wouldn't even be a thought in my mind. Even if Nick Sirianni, for whatever reason, manages to figure out how to win the first playoff game, even a second playoff game, and loses in the NFC Championship game, I almost don't want to.
I almost don't want to at this point.
Yeah, but honestly, I think you still part ways with Nick Sirianni. I think that he's lost the sideline. It's clear from any fan just watching the game. He's lost the locker room.
AJ Brown won't even talk to the media. Devonta Smith won't talk to the media. It's really bad. That's actually another thing too, as a captain. So you've been in the military, you understand what it means to and I'm not even going to pretend I know all the vernacular, but there are certain people, captain of the ship, if you will. You go down with the ship. You saw Brandon Graham talking. You saw Fletcher Cox talking. You saw some of these other captains, but to see Devonta Smith and especially AJ Brown that are out of sight, out of mind. One, that's really bad for the demeanor in the locker room and what players, especially these young players, because we have a lot of them, are looking to them and saying hey, what's the vibe? What are we supposed to be doing here? But I'm also very worried that we're just going to see a very dysfunctional locker room. But I almost think that if we lose the first playoff game, it's almost better for us because I'm almost happy we didn't have a sloppy win. Yesterday, I'm glad that we lost because we didn't deserve to win that game. But back to my question. I'm kind of dragging on here. What is your thoughts on the captains being silenced through all of this? Offensive captains.
I think it's a perfect illustration of how they truly feel about the situation. One of my last first sergeants in the Army, when I was a captain, he, I had a pretty sort of uneventful command. I had a pretty uneventful kind of experience in leadership in the military, as far as things going bad versus things going good, up until I had this first sergeant who was you're going to be defined. Your leadership is going to be defined by the worst moments that you have to endure. Last season, I can't name a lot of worst moments that we had last season. I can't name a lot of bad sort of experiences that we had in the latter part of 2021. I can name a lot of bad experiences this season, and I think Nick Sirianni's leadership is being defined by those moments. And I think when you look at Bill Belichick, who does have a horrible, horrible team right now, no one is questioning his leadership right now. because it is clear that he is doing everything humanly possible to get the most out of he can out of what he has, which is a lackluster in talent as far as his team is concerned. Nick Sirianni, in my mind, is the person who can come in and manage a company while it's performing smoothly, but he is not the person that you bring in for a turnaround. He is not the person that you bring in when you need something that's innovative or something that challenges the status quo. He is a good team manager, and when things go wrong, it's time to move on. And Alex, I think things have gone wrong to a point where we've lost to probably the worst team in the NFL going into the playoffs in a time when you need to be winning football games. We are losing football games. Think back, like, I just want to like highlight this piece because I was kind of shocked when I read this. 28 days ago, the Eagles were 10-1. Jalen Hurts was the clear MVP favorite. I got on Instagram and took a video selfie talking about how Jalen Hurts was the MVP because he just ran in that game-winning touchdown against the Buffalo Bills. The Eagles had the number 1 rush defense in the NFL. We had the 6th overall defense. We had the number 4 passing offense and the number 4 rushing offense. And in those 28 days, we've gone 1-4. I can understand Philadelphia losing to San Francisco after we've had that emotional game against Buffalo. I can understand losing in Dallas. I can't understand losing to Seattle. To Drew Lock in Seattle. I can't understand losing to the Arizona Cardinals without Hollywood Brown. I just don't.
Yeah.
It's time to move on.
Yeah. I mean, listen, man, our offense is healthy. There was no big gaps missing yesterday. It looks like Devonta Smith did suffer a mild ankle sprain, so he should be back. At this point, just sit everyone. Just sit everyone for the last week of the year. We don't need to. Can we fall anymore? No. Packers are 8-8.
We can't fall anymore.
We can't fall anymore. So honestly, it looks like as of right now, unless some things happen, the playoff bracket is going to be San Francisco is going to be at a bye. Green Bay is going to go to Dallas. Rams are going to go to the Lions, and we're going to go to Tampa. I mean, I guess from a playoff perspective, that's probably the best news for us, but it sucks, man. It sucks. I don't even know if we want to do an episode this week. Like, what's there to break down? I think the thing that also just like really hurts is we had it. We had everything we needed. The Lions somehow on a questionable call lost the game in Dallas. The division was ours for the taking.
Can we talk about that? Because obviously we've talked about refereeing in the NFL this season and how it's appeared to have gotten probably the worst it's ever been. Mm-hmm. And in this case, where you've got such a monumental play call that ends on a debacle, this referee crew has now been demoted. They can't ref any playoff game this season. I don't know what their future is going to be like. But yeah, the NFL has said that they're not reffing any playoff games this season.
Wow. I did not hear that. Yeah. I mean, it was the call wrong though. Like it was an illegal formation regardless. So isn't that still illegal touching, which is what they called? They didn't say ineligible receiver. They said illegal touching. And since he wasn't covered, he wasn't able to make that call regardless if he checked in or not. I just think everyone's kind of focusing on the wrong things here.
Yeah. The thing is what they called was a penalty. And I think who knows if they would have called that, an illegal touching or an illegal formation because an eligible receiver was covered by another eligible receiver. Who knows if they would have called that? Mm-hmm. But them calling an illegal touching is because they're saying that Decker didn't report.
Right. Yeah, and that's not the right call. He did. There's plenty of video evidence to support that he did say that. So, yeah, it's like, does it come down to, well, pick your poison? But that's not what they actually called on the field, right? Right. And they even went into this long thing where Troy Aikman and whoever he's hosting with, and they did the post-game show. Like, they broke it all down. They're like, no, he definitely did what he needed to do. I'm also trying to think of, like yesterday, the pass interference call on Kelly Ringo was really bad. Now, the Arizona Cardinals should have never put 35 points on us, but like, come on, dude. Like, he dragged him down. Kelly had nothing to do with that play. So that was pretty bad too with the officiating.
Yeah, honestly, I don't know if we can rectify officiating at any point in the near future without the use of some type of technology.
Yeah.
Um, I think because we've got all these different camera angles, we can basically referee a football game because we're able to see this stuff in slow motion, whereas they've got to react to it in real time. The human eye is one of the most inconsistent, uh, can't depend, non-dependable tools that are out there in nature, and yet we use it as a resource to guide us in making decisions so often. And I think, especially, I don't gamble, right? But like the amount of money that's going into FanDuel and DraftKings and all of these other sports betting websites that's now being affected by boneheaded calls like this, where it needs to be right. And these people are potentially like, how many people potentially lost millions of dollars on Saturday night because of a bum-headed call on the field that could have been rectified with replay technology?
So here's a question I want to ask everyone on social media and chime in the comments. My wife has brought this up to me before and it's pretty interesting. So the question is in a time where it doesn't look like blatant calls are being called penalties anymore, it's more so law of the land, anything that you see in the rule book, do you think that every single play, regardless of what it is, should be subjected and being able to be challenged?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, well, obviously,
Like, I
please
mean, this
comment and
means
let us know.
this means holding, this means pass interference, this means delay a game, this means false starts. I mean, anything. Do you think that anything in the NFL should have the ability to be challenged?
Obviously, our listeners, our followers, please let us know what you think in the comments. But I honestly think everything should be up for discussion. If they can review a touchdown within the 40 seconds or the 25 seconds of the play clock right after a score is confirmed before the extra point is kicked, then they should absolutely review every single play.
Yeah.
It's the amount of money going into this game warrants that they get these calls right, and it warrants that a mistake, a human error, which is very common, and it shouldn't be looked at as someone who can't do their job correctly. It is just being human. That should have the ability to be rectified to make sure that we are getting these plays called right. What do you think, Alex?
Well, but that also means, though, on plays that don't get called, you can challenge and say, hey, there was this. So now you enter into really uncharted territory where a holding call isn't called. Like you see all the time with the Kansas City Chiefs. I especially remember the one against the Jets on that
Jets. Oh
primetime
my
game. I'm like,
God.
holy crap, dude. But that means that you can also throw a flag and say, hey, I saw blatant holding there. And I think a lot of offensive and defensive linemen would agree that there's holding way more times than it's called. So now you open up a different bag of worms. So I think it's an interesting debate. Personally, I think anything that is called on the field should be able to be challenged. And I was really much against this. But I've actually gotten to the point where I've conditioned myself that at the end of every single big play, the end of every single touchdown, at the end of almost anything, I'm looking to see on the scoreboard if there's a little tiny flag notification, because more times than not, it feels like they're getting called back and in bigger and bigger moments. So yeah, I do think you should be able to challenge it. You're giving more power back to these, to the coaches, instead of saying, hey, they're flipping their lids and throwing headsets and everything. All right, then waste a challenge on it. If you really feel that committed to it, the NFL should allow them to be able to do it. But I think in some of those gray areas like holding, I don't really know how you rectify the situation, but it's an interesting debate for sure.
Yeah, and I think all I'm looking for really is consistency. Whenever I see these referee crews against the Eagles, or like, the Eagles are 30-1 or anything like that, I want consistency. I want to see that one referee crew isn't, a little bit more lackadaisical when it comes to pass interference than another crew. I want
Yeah.
to have the players understand what I can and can't do and not have to adjust their playing style because they are with a certain referee crew.
Yeah.
That's plain and simple.
Yeah. So, all right, man. Well, I guess, I'll give you my closing thoughts. You give me yours and then we'll send off episode 80. I'm not mad. I'm not enraged, but like I said, my spirit has been crushed. I don't care about the playoffs anymore for this team. Sure, playing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is something that may be exciting. My wife and I actually booked a getaway that weekend because we won't have a playoff game to go to at Lincoln Financial, which is really, really depressing. So that's really it, guys. Ali and I were on the same page where we warned everyone last year was our Goldilocks year. We had everything in there. We had a rookie quarterback. We had top players in the position. We kind of stumbled into the Super Bowl with the hurt Brock Purdy. And at the end of the game, we had an opportunity to win it. New defensive, offensive coordinators. Nick Sirianni's still very much immature. Some players have started regressing, and now we see what happens when he's faced with some adversity. This is the worst 11-5 team I think I've ever seen in my life, maybe comparable to the Steelers of last year. It's not exciting. It's not exciting to be an Eagles fan. I don't know why I subject myself to this. I love this team. I'm going to continue to root for this team, but my spirit is crushed. There is no other Eagles news going on right now that's going to make me feel any differently right now. So best of luck against the Giants. We'll see what happens against the Bucks if that's the way it shakes out. But I think at this point, I'm hoping for a first-round exit so we can focus on the offseason and change some things and some personnel. There's not a lot of optimism coming out from me. Ali, close us out and send us home.
Sweet. I'll start with the negative, and then I'll turn into positive. The negative was when I was going through my X feed, I stopped by the Eagles Nation page where they said that they just realized this game against the Cardinals may very well have been Jason Kelce, Brandon Graham, and Fletcher Cox's last ever games played at Lincoln Financial Field. That's pretty crushing. That's pretty crushing. Considering how the season had started with all of the expectations to how it ended in sort of embarrassing fashion the way that it did yesterday. What I will say is at the end of it all, Howie Roseman, in my mind, has done some really boneheaded things like drafting Jalen Reagor instead of, Jay Jettis. He drafted JJ Arcega-Whiteside instead of DK Metcalf. But at the same time, he also built a team that went to the Super Bowl in 2017, even though his star MVP level quarterback was hurt. He then decides, after the owner decides to fire head coach Doug Peterson, to go out and rebuild the team and send another team to the Super Bowl 5 years later. I don't think this man is incompetent. I think he is consistently one of the smartest GMs that we have sort of found ourselves in or fell into. When we hear all these other stories of GMs getting fired, Howie Roseman is often lauded as the guy who other GMs have to sort of like hold on to their pockets to make sure that he doesn't rip them off. That guy is on our team. So as far as your comment of being excited for the offseason, if we do have an early first round exit, best case scenario is we've got a higher draft pick and we could potentially use that draft capital into sort of building another Super Bowl team in the next year, in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years.
You know what? Or start the tampering process. I don't think Jonathan Gannon truly understands what he did to this franchise with it. So we should take a page out of his book and start tampering with other people. What a bonehead, man. I can't stand that anyway.
Yeah. I mean, look, we can sit back and think about the what ifs if we had Vic Fangio, but it is what it is. The other positive thing that I'll point us to, right? Because I think you and I are cut from the same cloth. Like, we bleed green like any other Eagles fan, but at the same time, we love this game, man. We love this game. We love football like so much. Wild card weekend, best weekend ever, super wild card weekend. I think we have a lot to look forward to as fans of the game in general. Matthew Stafford, the old quarterback. I think he's the oldest active quarterback in the league right now, leading his team to another game in the playoffs, potentially going to his old team, Detroit, in the playoffs. Think about that storyline. Dak Prescott, he's having an MVP level season, and he's likely going to lose in the playoffs yet again, because I don't think anyone in the NFC can stick with the 49ers. And frankly, Lamar Jackson, man, what a resurgence for that guy. A one-time MVP looking to get his second MVP and potentially his first Super Bowl, when I felt like he had the potential to go out there and win that Super Bowl the first year that he was in. I think there's a lot of storylines to be excited about in the NFL this season that don't necessarily have to do with the Eagles. So I'm excited about how this playoff picture is going to unfold, and I'm excited about how this offseason is going to unfold, because frankly, we're at rock bottom right now in my mind, and the only way to go is up. So with that, thanks everyone for listening to our rant for the last 40 minutes. This has been episode 80 with the Wingin' It podcast. There's a lot to look forward to, despite the negativity, despite all of the ailments that we just described. I still think that we have one of the best quarterbacks in the NFC in Jalen Hurts. I think we've got the best 1-2 wide receiver combo in the league, even though our coaching can't figure out a way to sort of optimize us to our potential. And hopefully in the next weeks, months, and years, we see this team achieve its full potential in the way that we all know that we can. But for whatever reason, our coaching staff isn't executing to. So with that, go Birds, and we'll talk to you soon.